We have with us on the phone line Dr. Stewart Prest, who teaches at the University of British Columbia. He is with the Department of Political Science. He has recently written a piece for The Conversation, which has been republished by The Tie, where he has talked about Mark Carney's elbows up approach, and he says that it appears that Canada no longer has elbows. So what happened to that great promise on which Mark Carney was elected? Let's know from him. Dr. Prest, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time.
Good afternoon, man. It's my pleasure.
So from elbows up to elbows no more, what has gone wrong suddenly? He was doing so well. He was getting a lot of praise for whatever he was doing. But the last couple of weeks, at least, it appears that he is increasingly kowtowing to the United States, especially to President Donald Trump, to the point that he is now getting some reaction from the provinces of Ontario and British Columbia.
Yeah, I think it has always been a difficult balancing act for Prime Minister Carney to have, on the one hand, a good working relationship with the United States president, finding ways to identify where the two countries can work together and to maintain a kind of cordiality that is necessary to have a constructive dialogue with Canada's largest trading partner, but also to be true to what Canadians expect in terms of a leader with regard to making it clear where Canada's interests lie, making it clear that what is and is not negotiable for the country. And so one of the points that has come up recently with regard to this ad campaign by the Ontario government that was using Ronald Reagan's words and his positions on free trade as a way to remind Americans through a series of advertisements to remind Americans that free trade has been a conservative value and something that the Republican Party has believed in for some time. Mark Carney found himself in a difficult situation over this ad because it was not his own campaign, his government's campaign. It was true, and yet it annoyed the U.S. president. So what to do in a situation like that? Do you find ways to stand up for the truth that the Ontario ad was saying, or do you find a way to try to make things okay with the U.S. president? And he chose the latter, and he offered a personal apology for this advertisement, effectively advertising for something that was true. And that's where we get into a difficult situation.
Well, it's always the case with nice guys, quote unquote, that they don't know how to do politics. And that's what is often talked about when Mark Carney is discussed, that he's a great economist, but perhaps not a good politician. Now, what has happened as a result of that is our national policy appears a little confused when it comes to the United States. On one hand, the federal government is talking about, he's in fact talking in two different languages. At home, Mark Carney talks about the relationship with the United States worsening, and he went to Ottawa at a university where he said that our relationship with the United States is not going to be the same anymore. So we have to look for partners elsewhere. And yet when he meets Donald Trump, and Donald Trump makes it appear that he's on very good terms with Mark Carney, and yet when he returns, he slaps more tariffs on him. So national policy appears a little confused. So what's your sense of it?
I think Mr. Carney is trying to, if you like, square a circle that cannot be squared. You cannot, at the one time, maintain a working relationship with a partner to the south that is not really a partner, increasingly a kind of rogue actor internationally that is constantly placing demands on other countries, and the closer the ally, the harsher the demands, it seems, quite often. And so you can't find ways to continue to try to placate that partner while also standing up for the idea of an independent and sovereign Canada that won't put up with that kind of thing. You can't be both those roles. And so Mr. Carney, I think, is finding it difficult to try to be what the room requires of him in these different situations. And so when he's dealing with Mr. Trump, to be conciliatory, when he's trying to tell Canadians where he thinks the country needs to go, he's talking about the need to stand up. And so at some point he's going to have to find a way to bridge the gap between these different rooms and these different messages, because they are so different. And at a certain point that might lead to either a breaking point with the U.S. president where there is a more distinct falling out. And given that, as you mentioned, tariffs continue to increase, this approach of trying to be conciliatory does not seem to be benefiting Canada in
Hmm.
any tangible way. So we might see a breaking point there, or Canadians may get frustrated with a prime minister who talks about independence and insulation, but does not act that part.
Hmm. You also write in your article that the United States must be handled as a regime, not a democracy. That's a little scary, isn't it? I mean, if it's a regime, that we don't know which way this regime is going to go when it comes to our relationship with that country.
Yeah, absolutely. We can note that there is still democracy underway in the United States. There are democratic practices.
Hmm.
There are institutions that continue to operate, but they do not operate as they once did to the extent that they did.
Hmm.
We can look to live examples where we can see the United States president exercising control over aspects of the U.S. budget that should not be the president's to decide.
Hmm.
Congress is not standing up for its rights to control the power of the purse in the way it once did. Congress is not fulfilling its constitutional duty. So ways in which we expect that constitutional democracy to right itself when things are impaired, those mechanisms are not operating right now. And so
Hmm.
we have to deal with this reality that the United States is led by a president who is not operating along normal democratic lines, subject to normal democratic constraints,
Hmm.
and we have to plan accordingly. And that takes two directions simultaneously. One is to modulate our message to deal with the reality that we have to focus on the central actor and not necessarily campaigning in the way we normally would,
Hmm.
speaking to other decision makers and trying to be aware of that. But it also means being aware that democracy here is fundamentally at stake, and whenever we are engaged in a conversation,
Hmm.
it will have implications for the conduct of democracy in Canada, in the United States, and so that's where it really becomes important not to apologize for
Hmm.
speaking what is factually correct. That's the sort of thing that autocrats, non-democratic leaders expect, but Democrats can't afford to do.
Now, as we speak, there's a very high profile election happening in New York City. And should Zohran Mamdani win tonight, do you think that would be a referendum for Donald Trump? And would that also send out a message to Mark Carney here in Canada that perhaps being an antithesis to Donald Trump makes more sense in the times that we live in?
I think if we see this result in New York City, it will tell us something about New York. It won't necessarily tell us something about the country and the United States as a whole. But Zohran Mamdani has been able to articulate a campaign that is starkly at odds with honestly both where typical Republicans and Democrats are at the moment, and so a victory for him would serve as a reminder for folks in the United States that the current situation is not inevitable, that it is possible to articulate something different and conduct politics differently. But whether that message resonates more broadly in the United States, we have to wait and see for other elections at other levels. But it does mean that we have to focus on the president and dealing with the United States president as he is. But we also have to focus on the possibility of more democratic futures to come.
A CNN poll on the popularity of the president that has come out this week suggests that his unpopularity is at 63%, which is amazing for a president who has not yet completed a full year in office. Is Mark Carney then reading the tea leaves properly? So if a president is getting increasingly unpopular at home, should we really have these negotiations with him?
I think it's a good question. You're right that Donald Trump is this strange paradoxical figure right now, where he has managed to arrogate to himself, to collect to himself a measure of power that is unprecedented for presidents in certainly in peacetime and really at any time in American history. We don't see presidents with this much deference from different actors inside their party, outside their party, but it is not the end of the story in the United States, and these actions are unpopular, and all it will take ultimately for the United States to move in a different direction is for politicians in the United States, particularly within the Republican Party, that seems to be so attached to the Trump momentum, the Trump identity, if you like, to see that there are other messages that actually will work better with voters over the long term, and the longer that the party stays invested in this Trumpian message, the more it will be focused on trying to find ways to hold on to power no matter what, in manner reminiscent of that January 6th storming of the Capitol, which is to say, non-democratically, and so we hold out hope that other Republicans will see that this direction, the actions of paramilitary actors like ICE across American cities is not popular. It is not what Americans want in their country. And but until we see that change in direction being picked up elsewhere, Mr. Carney is stuck, having to deal with the president in front of him. So it's absolutely the case that holding space for different democratic futures is important in the present, but finding ways to continue to manage that relationship is also just as important.
In the budget today, the Prime Minister has talked about axing 40,000 federal jobs, and that's a huge, huge number. And already the Conservatives and other opposition parties are saying that we don't like this budget. Now, should the Carney government fall, because if they can't pass the budget, they will obviously have to resign. If it falls, and should there be another election, do you think there'll be a repeat of whatever happened a few months earlier when Carney came to power, or do you think something entirely different will happen?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this kind of conversation that we're having would be directly relevant to the outcome of the election, because it's still going to be about Trump. That's this defining figure of this moment in global history, effectively, and that will shape how Canadians think going into the polls. Which leader is best positioned to move the country in a direction that is going to be protective of Canada's sovereignty? That's fundamentally what most Canadians want. We do have this minority within the population that seems like it thinks the best direction for the country is to somehow fall in line with that Trump train, if you like. But that's very much a minority position, and so it will be, in some sense, a rematch of the spring election. And I don't know that the Conservatives have really articulated a vision that would lead the country in a new and sustainable direction that would be the kind of thing that most Canadians want. And so they're still looking for that alternative message. So if there were an election, I don't know that much would change in terms of the result, which is one of the reasons why I remain skeptical that we actually will see an election. I think eventually cooler heads will prevail, and some member of the opposition, some members of the opposition will find ways to either vote in favor of this budget, or sufficient numbers will stay home that it gets over the finish line with the Liberal support it has, because voters are not looking for another election, and the parties don't have a different argument to make to voters yet. So it will be hard to justify going back to the polls yet again.
On that note, Dr. Prest, thank you so much for making time for us. It's always a delight to have a conversation with you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Take care.